He wasn't supposed to stop. Rowan Hale's life ran on precision, boardrooms, investors, schedules that left no room for surprises. But the envelope on his marble reception desk stopped him cold. Across its wrinkled front, in the block letters of a child, was written, "Can you read this letter? It's very important." Behind those words stood a girl in a red coat, backpack held together with a paperclip, eyes too tired for her age. What she carried would unravel a death, a cover-up, and the truth about what his empire had become. He saw the envelope before he saw the little girl. It lay on the corner of the marble reception desk, like it had been placed there by a careful hand, not tossed or slid, but set down the way you'd place a candle, where you hoped someone would notice it. The paper was thin and a little wrinkled, folded 3 times, edges softened by fingers that had handled it too many times. Across the front, in careful block letters made by someone still learning to write, was a single line that stopped him mid-stride. "Can you read this letter? It's very important." Rowan Hale did not stop for many things. At 45, he ran Hale Meridian, a logistics empire with ports in 6 countries and a board that did not accept slow days. His itinerary was a machine run by other machines, calendars, agents, chiefs of staff, all synchronized to ensure he stepped where he should with the precision of a second hand on a Patek. 8th floor, investors at 9. 10th floor, legal at 10. Lunch, a function disguised as food. He had never been late to a meeting he chose to attend. He had never, until now, paused at his own reception desk with his coat still on and his coffee still hot to stare at an envelope with childish writing. "Sir?" the receptionist whispered, noticing the disruption in the constant motion that was Rowan. "A child left it. She asked for you by name." He turned. The lobby was morning bright, glass absorbing the December sun, the city reflected in it like a moving painting. Near the column with the ficus no one watered correctly stood a small girl in a red coat, too thin for the season. Her hair was the dark spill of a winter river pulled into a ponytail with a thrift store elastic, and her backpack had a zipper held together by a paperclip. She stood with her back straight and her chin set, as if she too understood the language of schedules and was trying to appear on time for something important. "Did you leave this?" he asked, picking up the envelope, the way he would pick up a fragile artifact. She nodded once. "My name is Leila," she said. "Can you read it? It's very important." She didn't apologize for the interruption. She didn't smile to soften it. She simply stated a fact, like the weather. "Come with me," he said before part of him, the part trained in caution and staff and protocols, could catch up and suggest calling security, legal, someone whose job it was to screen the world for the sake of efficiency. Efficiency could wait. He gestured to the small seating area off the main lobby. Leather chairs, a low table with magazines no one read, an art book open to a photograph of a ship in fog. He sat. Lila sat across from him, hands folded on her backpack, as if bracing it against something invisible. He broke the seal. Inside was a note on lined notebook paper written in thick pencil strokes that pressed hard enough to leave dents. "Dear Mr. Hale, please read this first. Please don't be mad that I came up the elevator." The guard said I couldn't, but then he had to go talk to a man who spilled his coffee, and I got in with other people, and then I found your name on the wall and asked that nice lady. My mom said if anything ever happened, I should bring you the letter in the envelope under the sink, wrapped in the grocery bag, and not give it to anyone else. She said you would know what to do because you're in charge. My name is Lila Cruz. My mom is Elena. Please read her letter next. Please don't throw it away. Love, Lila." He looked up. "Your mom is Elena Cruz?" he asked. Lila nodded but didn't speak. Her eyes were not the bright curiosity he expected from a child standing in a building like this. They were tired eyes in a small face, watchful in the way of someone who had learned too early that adults could be unpredictable. He unfolded the second sheet tucked behind the first. It was standard printer paper, creased and kept once, then creased and kept again. the way people keep things they intend to act on but can't yet. The handwriting was an adult's cramped urgency. As he began to read, something shifted inside him, something he had built, deliberately for decades, a wall against the noise and need of the world. The words moved through it like rain through dust. "Mr. Hale, if you're reading this, something went wrong." And I didn't get to say the rest in person. I don't have the kind of access people in your office have. I don't have a lawyer. What I have is the truth and my hands and what I kept for proof. I am writing about Dock 17 and the roofs that leak and the safety straps that were ordered, then vanished, and the day manager who told us to put a tarp over a live conveyor and hurry because the trucks were backed up and Christmas was coming. I am writing about the woman I was before all of that, the one who could lift a pallet and still make it home in time to thread my daughter's hair for picture day. 2 months ago, I filed reports that never came back. I have photos on this phone. I have emails no one answered. I have a supervisor named Owen Kincaid who said, "We'll take care of it in Q1," and then he took me off the schedule. Maybe I'm doing this wrong. Maybe I'm supposed to send this to a reporter. But I saw a video where you said, "If you see something broken, fix it." I saw your face when you said it, and I thought maybe you mean it. I thought maybe you remember what it was like to be the one under the thing everyone else had built. If I don't show up to a shift, it's because I can't. If something happens to me, I need someone to look out for Lila. She's 8, and she's perfect, and she loves reading about rockets. She thinks the moon is a quiet friend. Please. If you do one thing, check Dock 17. Ask where the straps went. Ask who signed the maintenance orders. There is a name in the margins of the clipboard. Look at the margins. That's where we write the real things. Elena Cruz, Warehouse 6. The rest was a list of dates and numbers and pictures printed small and taped on. A strap order with a purchase order code, a photo of a ceiling stained the shape of a country with a drip bucket below, a screenshot of an email with a subject line, "Urgent Safety, no response." Rowan held the letter like it might burn him, or free him, or both. He read it again. The edges of the paper cut into his fingertips, grounding him in something more honest than the glass and steel around him. He remembered a night many years ago, a motel room that smelled like bleach and old blanket. His mother at the small Formica table with a blue pen and a sheet of paper torn from a pad. She'd written him a letter, then two, a letter he had never read because he'd been angry and 17 and certain. He'd thrown it away, and there were only so many letters in the world that were meant for you. He looked at Lila. "When did you find this?" "Last night," she said. Her voice was steady. "Under the sink. My grandma said not to bother important people, but my mom said you would know." "Where is your mom?" Silence, the kind that has weight. "Is she at work?" he asked stupidly because his mind was not ready to accept the shape of the answer it already sensed. "No," Lila said. "She went to work, and then there was the big noise, and then they took us to my grandma's house, and the lady with the clipboard said there was an accident. She said sometimes people don't wake up." She swallowed. "My mom didn't wake up." The paper shook in his hands. It wasn't the shock of tragedy. A man like him, shielded by executives and silence, knew how to file disaster under columns and move forward. It was the sequence of the words. "My mom said you would know. Check the margins, please." He stood up without feeling his legs do it. "Do you have someone here with you?" he asked. "My grandma is downstairs," Lila said. "She doesn't like elevators." "Will you both come with me?" he asked. "I want to hear everything you can tell me. I want to make sure you get home safe, and I need you to show me anything else your mom kept." He felt his own voice as if from a distance, how it had changed in the last 30 seconds. It was no longer the voice people heard in earnings calls, confident like granite. It was human and raw, flawed with something that should have shown itself years earlier and hadn't. He took them to the conference room no one used because it didn't have a view, the one with the opaque glass that made the city into a suggestion instead of a command. Ruth, his chief of staff, met him at the door with a surprise in her eyes. She hid immediately because Ruth was the kind of person who ran this part of his life like a chessboard. He handed her the letter. "No copies," he said. "No scans. Eyes only. I want everyone in ops, safety, and legal in the boardroom at 11. I don't care what they have scheduled. Cut through it." "Rowan," Ruth said carefully, and that careful said more than any other word might have. "This is, if this is what it looks like." "Then we've been the kind of company I said we would never be," he said, "and you know what I do with that." She nodded. "I'll clear it." He turned back to Lila and the grandmother, who sat with hands folded the same way, 2 generations of women trying to make their bodies take up less space than their hurt. "Do you have someone to call?" he asked the grandmother. "Is there anyone else with you?" "We have each other," she said, her voice deep with a life that had not been generous. "And we had Elena. Do you read the letter, Mr. Hale?" "I read it," he said, "and I'm going to read it again. But I need to ask, did your daughter tell you anything about reports she filed, about names?" The grandmother's mouth flattened. She said a man with a shiny watch told her to stop making trouble. A name formed in his mind like a bruise. Kincaid. He had a shiny watch and a smile that never reached his eyes. Owen Kincaid, Regional Operations Director, promoted quickly in the last 2 years because he made numbers behave on paper, and shareholders liked the math. Rowan had liked the math too, until now. "I'm going to the dock," he said. "Ruth, get the car." "You have investors at—" He held up a hand and didn't say what pulsed behind his ribs. Investors can wait, because a letter had taught him the difference between urgent and important a long time ago, and he had forgotten. The ride to Warehouse 6 took 22 minutes in a city that could bookend lives with its bridges and forget them with its speed. The driver's eyes flicked to the mirror, reading the weather inside the car like pilots read the sky. Rowan held the letter again, felt the indentations where Lila's pencil had pressed into the paper, the taped-down photos that didn't belong on a letter but did now because a mother did what she had to do with the tools she had. They passed a memorial before they reached the docks. A chain-link fence dressed in handmade signs, white lilies wrapped in plastic, a child's drawing of a crane with a sad face. He told the driver to stop. He got out and stood for a moment with the cold in his bones, hatless for once, the wind tugging at the edges of his control. He put his hand on the fence, not because it would change anything, but because everything had to change, and a body sometimes needs to make a gesture to signal its own intent to itself. At Dock 17, the smell of oil and damp cardboard hung below the metal roof. The ceiling above the conveyor was patched with tarp and hope, the kind of job done by men who knew they'd be asked to do it again. He saw, within seconds, the shape of the cut corners, a strap rated for one weight, used for another, a maintenance sheet filled out in all the right places except the part where it mattered, and on the edge of the clipboard, faint and in pencil, a signature partially erased and rewritten, Kincaid's, overwritten by someone else's initials. The ops manager met him near the conveyor with the look the middle layer always wore when something significant had escaped their algorithms, a combination of fear and performative competence. "Mr. Hale, we didn't expect—" "No," Rowan said, his voice clipped enough to cut rope. "You didn't. Where is Kincaid?" "On his way," the manager said. Eyes slid away. Loyalty in rooms like this wasn't earned by dignity. It was purchased by fear. "There was an audit last quarter." "Where are the strap receipts? The photos attached to Elena Cruz's reports? Where are the actual straps that were supposedly ordered?" I'd have to check the system." "Don't check the system," Rowan said. "Check the shelves." He walked past him and into the cage where the strapped pallets sat in neat walls like obedient beasts. He knew how to read a warehouse. He had built his first one by hand when he was 20 and hungry and certain that the world could be moved if you learned the lever. He had not forgotten the smell of cardboard and deadlines or the way the air changed when pressure moved through men's bodies at the end of a 12-hour shift. He tugged a strap from a rack, turned the metal between his fingers, read the stamped rating. It wasn't what the paperwork said it was. Kincaid arrived 5 minutes later in a coat that cost more than a forklift tire. His hair was precise, his tie a blue chosen by men who treat color like a weapon. He smiled the way men smile when they intend to own the conversation. "Rowan," he said, as if friendship was still an option, "we're managing the aftermath here. Legal says it's best if we—" "Legal says," Rowan repeated softly, like a man tasting a word and finding it rancid. He held up the strap. "This is rated for 900. The load was 12. The maintenance sheet says you signed off on the roof. The photos show you didn't. And a little girl came to my lobby with a letter because every other door was closed." Something flickered at the edges of Kincaid's mouth. Annoyance, not shame. "People panic after an accident," he said. "They look for someone to blame. If we start entertaining—" "You use that word like compassion is a mistake," Rowan said. The words came colder than the wind. "We will entertain facts, beginning now. You are suspended, effective this minute. Your badge, your keys, your access. Go home. Legal will be in touch." "You can't hang me out to dry because one of our loaders thought she knew OSHA better than—" "Her name," Rowan said, "was Elena. She had a daughter named Lila. She filed reports. She's not a statistic on your Q4 projections. Please do not mistake me for the man who is going to protect you from this." Kincaid laughed then, incredulous, a man who had climbed on fluent hypocrisy and assumed the air up here was always safe. "You really think you can pin company infrastructure on one director? We've made margin goals you set yourself. We have delivered this," Rowan said, motioning to the conveyor line where a section of paint on the floor had been scrubbed cleaner than the rest. "And I don't deliver my soul to a bonus. Get out." The investigation moved like a storm, sudden, wide, reshaping everything it touched. Ruth assembled an internal task force that could have taken apart a jet engine on a moving flight. Safety reopened reports marked closed with a red stamp that had become a ritual instead of a reality. Legal reviewed emails that read like a script for a play about plausible deniability. Procurement pulled receipts that led to a supply contractor owned by a cousin of a man who had once leased Kincaid a boat. It wasn't the kind of scandal that would make a headline by itself. It was smaller and meaner than that. The 1,000 quiet decisions that lead to one avoidable death and a child standing in a marble lobby with a letter. By afternoon, the boardroom was a room full of men and women who stood when Rowan walked in because they always did, and sat with poised pens because they always did. He didn't settle into his chair the way he usually did, one hand on the folder, the other on the glass of water he never drank. He stood at the head of the table like a man at the beginning of a confession. "We've failed," he said. 14 faces blinked. "We've failed in the way that matters before margins and after them. A woman named Elena Cruz wrote to us. She was ignored. The systems we trust, the systems I trust, were used to drop her voice into a pit." He didn't pass out reports. He didn't pull up slides. He took the letter from his jacket pocket and laid it on the table as if it belonged there more than any budget. He told them about the straps, the tarp, the erased initials. He told them about Kincaid and the audit that was a performance, not a practice. He told them about the girl who braved an elevator she feared to bring a letter. And at the end of the telling, his voice did something it had not done in a very long time. It broke. "I started this company outside of school and privilege, he said, and the room went softer, listening for something that was not a defense. "I used to sleep in the office on a cot because rent was more than payroll. I swore then that when we grew, I would not lose the thing that got me here, the thing that matters at the base of everything we build, people. Somewhere between then and now, I built walls so I wouldn't hear certain sounds. Today a child walked through them and handed me a letter. I am telling you this because we will not bury this with a settlement or a message crafted by a consultant. We are going to turn the company inside out." A director at the far end of the table cleared his throat. "We need to consider the legal exposure." "We will assume our responsibility," Rowan said, "and we will accept the consequences. That includes fines, penalties, and reputational damage. It also includes acting in the open, no NDAs that quiet the truth, no severance packages for men who hide behind frameworks. We are creating an independent safety council made up of workers, not executives. We will fund it at the level of marketing. We will allow anonymous reporting that goes not to a manager, but to that council. We will publish every report and its resolution. And before you say, investor, I will tell you what I'm about to tell them. If you measure a company only by quarterly returns, you are measuring a bruise and calling it a heartbeat. He felt a hand at his shoulder. Ruth, steady as a metronome, placed a glass of water there without being asked. He did not drink. He looked down the table and knew who was with him and who was calculating. He also knew the names of every warehouse supervisor who would hear about what happened in this room, and those names mattered more to him than the portfolio managers dialing into calls from quiet homes. Also, he said, I'm asking for your time right now. He opened the door. Lila stepped in, small, coat still red, the grandmother behind her holding a handbag that had seen every season of a hard life. The board members straightened, surprised into silence, like children taken by a teacher they love. This is Lila, Rowan said. She asked me to read a letter. I think we should hear it from the source. Lila did not look intimidated by the table or the view or the shoes or the money. She looked at the paper in her hands, then at the people who had built a world of projects and policies, and she began to read in the careful loudness of a child trained by a good teacher. Dear Mr. Hale, please read this first. Please don't be mad. Halfway through, her voice trembled, and the grandmother stood as if to steady her. But Lila took a breath, found her place again, and finished. When she sat, Rowan's hands were on the back of the chair, white at the knuckles, and there were men on that board who had never once in their lives cried in a room like this, who now looked at the ceiling to keep tears from falling where other people could see them. We will do everything we can, a woman in a Navy suit said quietly. Everything. He dismissed the board after they voted unanimously on measures some of them had not quite understood and would later question in private, because unanimity was the only clean thing he wanted on paper. He stood with Lila and her grandmother at the window that faced the river, where boats carried containers he now saw as rooms full of stories, rather than units of value. He remembered then the letter he had thrown away when he was 17 and left his mother to chase a life he had eventually caught and tamed and lost a part of himself too. He thought of the days he had allowed other people to decide what urgency looked like. He thought of Elena's handwriting. He put his palm flat against the glass and let himself cry for the first time in a long time, not in secret, not in control, but simply because a letter had demanded honesty from him he owed to his past. Lila saw, and because children sometimes understand grace better than adults, she looked away to give him privacy without moving an inch. News moved fast, as it always did. By evening, the accident at Warehouse 6 was a story with two parts, a death and what a corporation chose to do in response. The first could not be rewritten. The second was being written in a language most people had hoped to hear, but rarely did. Rowan held a press conference in the dock's break room with the pinball machine someone had fixed with duct tape. He refused the glass podium. He did not stand on a platform. He stood on the oil-stained cement and said the only words that mattered. We failed Elena. We failed Lila. We failed our people. I failed as a leader. This does not end with legal because it began with human. We are changing everything you see behind me, and we are doing it with the people who work here, not to them. That night he went to Elena's apartment. It was tidy in the way of women who carry homes on their backs and keep them upright through storms. The kitchen table had a floral plastic cloth cut too short for the corners. On it sat a mug with a chip, a jar of rice, a stack of school notices. The letter had come from under the sink, wrapped in a grocery bag knotted 4 times. He opened the cabinet and found a second package behind the trash bin, a phone wrapped in a sock. The screen lit when he charged it. Inside were photos that matched the printed ones and a video of the roof drip hitting a bucket with the rhythmic persistence of a metronome. He saved everything to an external drive. He sat on the couch while the grandmother made him tea he didn't want, and took it because rejecting comfort is its own kind of cruelty. "Why would she write to you?" the grandmother asked, not unkindly, just asking the question that hovers over every decision people without power make about where to place their small hope. "She saw a video," he said. "I said something I believe and didn't prove enough. Now I will." He didn't sleep. He didn't go home to the apartment that looked like a magazine. He stayed at his office and read through emails like a pastor reading confessions. He responded to employees himself. He wrote to investors and told them if they wanted a different CEO, they were welcome to find one, but he would not steer the ship by a compass that only pointed to profit. He wrote to Lila and told her they had found the strap receipts and the missing names, and he would take care of the things a child should not have to know about. He wrote to Elena in his head until it became a prayer. In the days that followed, truth did what it does when it is finally given a hallway to run down. Kincaid resigned before he could be fired and discovered that resigning did not protect him from a district attorney who had decided to learn what happens when a county worker dies for a spreadsheet. Procurement discovered that the strap vendor had inflated invoices and that someone in accounts had approved them in exchange for trips to a yacht that suddenly had fewer friends. The company discovered that making a thing right in public means you will bleed in public, and that is as it should be. Rowan went back to the dock every week, not with cameras, but with coffee, and he sat with the men whose hands built the numbers and asked them how to fix what they knew had been broken. They told him. He listened. He wrote it down, and he did not let their words disappear into a box. He created a fund in Elena's name that paid for funerals and rent and for Lila's space-themed bedspread and her copy of A Wrinkle in Time, and the tutor who met her at the library 3 days a week because she had missed too much school. He opened a reading room in the neighborhood, a bright, small place with a couch and soft lamps, and shelves that looked like possibility. On the first day, he hung a frame near the door with 2 pages inside, the child's note and the letter that had changed a fortune. He felt something lift in his chest every time the bell rang, and another kid walked in, strings on their hoodie flapping like flags. 3 months later, the first meeting of the Independent Safety Council was held in a warehouse near the river on a Saturday, when the boats moved slow and the sky was kind. The council members were people who had calluses and opinions and no patience for lip service. Lila came with her grandmother and sat in the front row with a notebook and wrote a title for the page, "Things Grown-ups Should Write Down But Forget." When it was Rowan's turn to speak, he didn't give a speech. He brought a chair to the center and invited anyone who wanted to come up and tell him one thing he had missed from the top of the building. He learned 36 lessons that day and committed to memory the look of a company when it tells the truth about itself. Board members left, some with polite goodbyes, some loudly, some with letters that said mismanagement of PR and overcorrection. New members came, the kind of people who understood that the right thing is sometimes the profitable thing and sometimes not, and you do it anyway. A year-end shareholder letter went out that did not mention a single percentage point until the 4th paragraph. "You cannot balance an equation that begins with a human cost," he wrote, "but you can stop writing them. Our measures next year are not margins first, but injuries last.